The front desk phone rang once and stopped. That was strange, but not unheard of. 10 minutes later it rang again, just one ring, then silence. I looked at the call log. Room 6. I picked up the house phone and dialed back. It rang twice, then went dead. Not picked up, just cut off mid-ring like the cord had been yanked. The snow outside had started falling sideways, heavy enough that you couldn't see the slope lights, and most guests were already tucked away in their rooms. All but one. Room 6. The guest who hadn't spoken a word at check-in, who paid in cash and signed the book with just a shaky X. Let me know where you're listening from tonight, and if you've ever worked someplace where the walls seem to hold a little too much silence. And if these stories keep you company, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one. My name's Dana Ellis. I was 37 back then, working the night desk at a mountain lodge near Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Winters were long and quiet up there, the kind of place people came to disappear for a few days. The pay wasn't great, but it came with a room and more peace than I knew what to do with after my divorce. I'd been there just over a year when this happened, so I knew the rhythms, which radiators clicked, which doors stuck in the cold. And I knew who belonged in which room, especially on nights like that one, when the snow piled up quick and nothing moved but wind. That particular week, we were only running at about half capacity. Most of the regulars had postponed due to a storm warning. We'd gotten 3 feet the night before, and by the time I came in for the overnight shift, it was coming down hard again. Just me at the desk, Len Turner handling maintenance and the boilers, and a handful of guests tucked in, cozy enough in its way. We had a habit of leaving the lobby fireplace burning past midnight more for atmosphere than heat. I remember setting out a plate of cookies someone's wife had sent in from town and thinking it might actually be a peaceful night. Then the quiet man showed up. He came in from the storm around 10:30. No reservation, no luggage, no gloves. Just a heavy parka that dripped steadily onto the slate floor and a paper envelope in one hand. I asked if he needed a room. He nodded once, handed over the envelope. Inside was the exact cash amount for 2 nights. No small talk, no name, just a tired blink and a faint cough like he hadn't used his voice in days. I told him we had openings and handed him the key for room 6. That was one of the corner units, nothing fancy, but it had a clear view of the mountain if the weather broke. He took the key, nodded again, and disappeared down the hall without a word. Left a trail of melting snow in his wake, but Len mopped it up without complaint. "You get a name?" Len asked me later as we checked the pipes down in the utility room. "Nope," I said. "Just an X on the ledger." Len gave a low chuckle. "One of those. We got a few of them every year, men who didn't want to be found. Usually harmless, sometimes ex-military, sometimes just tired of being looked at." I didn't think much more of it until the phone rang. It was close to midnight, just one ring. Room 6. I checked the log, assuming maybe he'd misdialed. Then it happened again, 10 minutes later. Just one ring. No answer when I picked up. I paged Len on the intercom. "You mind swinging past 6, I asked. "Weird call activity." "On it," he said. "Let me grab the passkey." A few minutes passed. I watched the lobby clock tick past 12:04 a.m. Then Len's voice came through the radio, low, uneasy. "Dana, room's empty." "What do you mean, empty?" "I mean, door was bolted from the inside chain, too. Took me a minute to get it open, But there's nobody here. No clothes, no boots, beds still made. I felt something tighten in my chest. Was the window open? Nope, Len said. Locked from the inside. Snow on the sills untouched. He came back up a few minutes later with the room key still in his hand. He was frowning in that slow, thoughtful way of his. The kind of frown that says a man's trying not to jump to conclusions. There's water in the tub, he said. Hot, but no steam. Like it was run and drained just before I got there. No footprints. No nothing. I offered him some of the stale cookies just to give us both something to do with our hands. We double-checked the cameras after that. The system was old, grainy, black and white, good enough to catch someone sneaking in or out, not much more. I rewound the hallway feed, saw myself handing over the key, saw the quiet man walk down the hall. No bags, just that envelope in one hand. He opened room 6, stepped in, and closed the door. That's it. No footage of him coming back out. I checked the exit doors. Nothing. No signs of movement past 10:32 p.m. Maybe he left during the gap Len offered, but we both knew that wasn't likely. We would have heard the alarm on the fire door or seen the exit cam flicker. Besides, the snow outside had already covered the sidewalks. There were no fresh prints, no tracks leading away from the building. Around 1:00 a.m., I walked past room 6 myself. The hallway was silent. That end of the building always smelled faintly of cedar, like the wood paneling had soaked it in over the years. I paused at the door, listening. Not for anything in particular, just listening. There was nothing, not even the hum of the radiator. Just before I turned to go, I noticed something. The door was slightly ajar. Not open, just unlatched, like someone had forgotten to pull it fully closed. I nudged it with my foot. The room inside was dark, but the bathroom light had been left on. A faint yellow glow. The mirror was fogged, even though there was no heat running. On the nightstand, the key I'd given him was sitting exactly in the center. Balanced. Not dropped, not tossed, placed. That was enough for me. I closed the door this time firmly and made sure it latched. Told myself I'd check again in the morning once the sun was up and the snowplow had made another pass. Maybe he'd left through the back. Maybe the wind buried his tracks. Maybe he was just one of those people who came and went without needing to explain themselves. But when I opened the guest book the next morning, the ledger where he'd signed his ex, the line was blank. Just a faint impression in the paper. No ink, like the pen had hovered and never touched down. I don't remember seeing that the night before. I remember the X. I remember it clearly. I kept the envelope he paid with. Still have it, in fact. No fingerprints, no markings, no serial numbers that matched anything. Just a quiet guest who came in from the storm, stayed for an hour, and left a room untouched except for a running bath, a key placed just so, and a silence that never quite left. Sometimes I wonder if he ever really left at all. And sometimes I wonder if he was ever there. I don't usually talk about this. It's one of those stories that starts normal nothing, flashy, nothing big, but by the time you realize what's wrong, you've already let it in the door. I was working nights back then, managing shipping for a wholesale supply warehouse outside Allentown. Just the usual stuff, janitorial goods, paper towels, bulk office supplies. Graveyard shift was never glamorous, but I liked the quiet. Fewer people, fewer problems. The kind of work where you can keep your head down and let the days blur together. My wife had passed 2 years earlier, and if I'm honest, the warehouse gave me something to hold on to. Routine has a way of keeping your hands busy while your brain settles down. We were short-staffed going into winter that year. One of the regulars got injured at home, another just stopped showing up. So I wasn't surprised when corporate sent us someone new. His name was Wesley. I remember it because it sounded like the kind of name that should belong to someone more confident than he looked. He was young, maybe mid-20s, thin in a way that didn't look healthy, and always wore this oversized red hoodie with the sleeves half shredded at the cuffs. When I asked if he needed gloves, he just said he didn't get cold. We were in Pennsylvania in November, and that building was a wind tunnel after dark, so that struck me as odd right away. He didn't talk much, but he was efficient. First night, he shelved an entire freight pallet solo without complaint. Didn't even take a break. I asked where he was from, if he'd worked warehouse before. He just said he'd been around and gave this awkward half smile, like it was a private joke. At first, I figured he was just another temp looking to disappear into overnight work, same as the rest of us. But it didn't take long before the little things started stacking up. For one, the time clock never read him right. The punch-in system we had was old but reliable. It logged ID badges down to the second. Every time Wesley swiped in, it registered his start time exactly 7 seconds before the scheduled shift. Not 6, not 8, always 7. Even if I watched him swipe in at exactly 10:00 p.m., the log would read 9:59:53 every single night. I mentioned it once to the payroll guy who brushed it off as a server delay, but I'd been in that building long enough to know what was normal. Then came the issue with the cameras. We had a basic CCTV system covering the main floor, the loading dock, and the staff hallway. I was reviewing footage one night after a crate went missing. Nothing serious, just cleaning fluid that someone probably misscanned, and I noticed something strange. At 2:17 a.m., camera 3 showed Wesley walking past the break room. 2 seconds later, camera 5, which faced the opposite direction near the dock, showed him passing again, headed the same way. That shouldn't have been possible. The two cameras were at least 60 feet apart, separated by a locked utility room and 2 sets of motion sensor lights. You couldn't move that fast on foot, and the lights never triggered. No one else was on that side of the building. I showed the footage to Wesley the next night just to see his reaction. He didn't even blink, just stared at the screen for a moment and said, "I must have doubled back." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "You're moving in the same direction in both clips." He shrugged, then went back to unpacking a shipment of disinfectant wipes without another word. After that, I started paying closer attention. I'd hear movement in parts of the warehouse that should have been empty. Soft, rhythmic footsteps between aisles that weren't on any route that night. One time I walked past the mop closet and found it cracked open, even though I'd locked it myself after inventory. Inside was a pallet jack, not ours. A brand I didn't recognize, painted matte black with no serial number. When I came back with Len, our day shift guy, it was gone. The other employees started to notice things too. One of the forklift drivers asked if we had a new cleaning crew because he kept seeing someone in red walking the upper level around 300 a.m. But we didn't have an upper level. Just a narrow catwalk near the HVAC, and no one was cleared to be up there without a safety harness. I checked. No sign anyone had accessed it. Dust was undisturbed. Wesley was always calm. Too calm. Even when I brought up the strange badge logs or missing time cards, he'd just nod like it didn't matter. And maybe to him, it didn't. There was one night in early December when the heating system went out. Temperatures dropped to the low 20s, and the whole warehouse felt like a meat locker. I offered the guys extra break time in the heated office. Everyone took it except Wesley. He stayed out there alone, moving boxes like nothing had changed. When I brought him coffee to warm up, I saw frost forming in his hair. But his skin wasn't red from cold. It wasn't anything, just pale and still. The last night I saw him was during inventory audit. We do it once a quarter, verify counts, manually run reports, make sure the books match. I stayed late, watching from the office monitors. Around 3:00 a.m., I saw Wesley on the floor. Nothing unusual at first. He was moving slowly between aisles, clipboard in hand. But then he stopped. Just stood there for a long time, staring at the back wall where the old conveyor system used to run. Then he turned toward the camera. Not like he was glancing up or reacting to something. He turned deliberately, looked directly into the lens, and smiled. The next frame was static. That camera feed cut out for 12 seconds. When it came back, he was gone. I checked the other angles. No sign of him, no exit, nothing on the lot. His badge hadn't logged an exit swipe. His jacket was still on the hook in the break room. I stayed until sunrise, checking every square inch of the warehouse. No trace. His locker was empty. No ID, no time card, no name in the system anymore. I called the cops. Officer Brewster was the one who responded. Seemed skeptical at first until I showed him the camera footage. He watched the part where Wesley turned and smiled. Asked if I had the footage from earlier in the week. I pulled it up. Same thing. Always at 3:00 a.m. Always that same moment pause, turn, stare. The footage was a little different each time, but the expression was identical. Right down to the way he lifted his left eyebrow just slightly. The department opened a missing persons case, but it didn't go far. HR claimed they never processed a hire under that name. No background file, no emergency contact. The temp agency we used said they'd never sent anyone by that name. I gave them a badge number and they said that badge had been deactivated last year. I printed one of the photos from the camera just to have something to show people. But when I picked it up from the drugstore printer, the face was blurred, just his. Everything else was clear, shelves, pallets, even the floor labels. But Wesley's face was this soft smear of motion like he'd turned his head mid-shot. Only I knew he hadn't. The warehouse clock is still off by 7 seconds. I check it sometimes. Still shifts the logs, still misreads swipe-ins when I test old badges. Len says it's a software bug, nothing more. But every so often around 3:00 a.m., I'll walk the back floor and get this cold feeling at the base of my neck, like someone's just passed by. Not beside me, but through me. Like time caught a snag on something it wasn't supposed to, and when I pass the camera near aisle 14, I swear it hums louder than the others. Just for a few seconds, like it's waking up or remembering. Back in 2004, our neighborhood felt like the kind of place nothing ever really happened. Not in a dramatic way, anyway. Just rows of quiet homes, tidy driveways, and a school bus route that ran like clockwork. But that spring, something changed, and I've never been able to figure out what I saw or what would have happened if I hadn't told someone when I did. I was 16 that year, still living with my folks just outside Denver. My bedroom window faced the cul-de-sac. I used to sit there doing homework in the evenings, listening to music with the window cracked. Sometimes I'd see neighbors walking their dogs or kids riding bikes, especially when the snow melted off and everyone started getting cabin fever. But one night in early April, I noticed a van parked just beyond the streetlights at the far end of our block. It was beige or gray, hard to tell in the dim light, and the windows were tinted darker than anything I'd seen on a regular vehicle. At first, I figured it was a contractor working a job nearby. The house on the corner was being remodeled, so it made sense, but the van didn't move. I sat at my desk from about 700 to 10 doing math homework, and every time I glanced out, it was still there. No lights on, no one got out, just sitting there idling, though I couldn't hear the engine from where I was. That wasn't what really got to me, though. What got to me was that when I looked out just before bed, the van was gone. But when I woke up for school the next morning, there it was again. Same spot, same angle, like it had backed in deliberately, the front facing away from the house. My dad noticed it too when he went out to get the paper. He made a comment over breakfast, something about the neighborhood watch needing a wake-up call. He even knocked on the window and waved, but nobody rolled it down. We joked that maybe it was just someone working night shifts, sleeping in their van between jobs. But then it kept showing up, every night that week like clockwork. Never earlier than 7 tuzzers, never later than 7:15. Always gone by 11 sazro. No plates I could see, just a dull rectangle where one should have been. It never parked close enough to be directly under the street lamp, but just far enough to stay shadowed. I started keeping a little log in the back of my notebook, just times and notes. I didn't even know why I was doing it. Maybe part of me thought it would be a good writing prompt for English class or something. Then, on Friday night, something changed. Around 9:30, I was in my room playing a computer game when I noticed the van wasn't in its usual place. I got up, checked the window. Nothing. No car, no movement, just empty street. But then a few minutes later, I saw headlights flick on down the road, not headlights turning on from a parked car. These were approaching, slow, steady. And when they passed under the last street light before our driveway, I saw it was the van. This time it didn't stop at the edge of the block. It kept coming. I stepped back from the window, not scared exactly, but alert. The van rolled right past our house, no sound but tires on wet pavement. It didn't stop, didn't slow down, just coasted past the houses like it was counting driveways. It turned down the side street near the Thompsons' place and vanished behind the tree line. I waited a few minutes, then went back to my desk, trying to shake off the weird tension crawling up my spine. The next morning, I overheard my mom on the phone with someone from church saying a dog had gone missing. One of the younger kids' golden retrievers apparently let out in the yard after dinner and never came back in. That kind of thing happens, sure, but that was the first time I wondered if it might be connected. The following week, the van returned, same routine. Only this time, I was ready. I used the family's old camcorder to try and get footage, propped it up on my desk, pointed it through the blinds. But when I reviewed the tape, it was just static between 7 huzzers and 11 huzzers, like something had disrupted the feed even though the battery was full and it recorded just fine before and after. I tried again the next night and got nothing but 4 hours of flickering, colorless blur. By the second week of May, 3 families had filed missing pet reports. A cat, 2 dogs, always small or friendly breeds. And the van kept coming. I finally told my dad I thought someone was scoping out the neighborhood, maybe even using the van as cover. He said he'd call the non-emergency line, and he did, but the officer who came by said they couldn't do much unless the van was trespassing or someone had seen them doing something illegal. So I waited. I stopped sleeping much. I kept the window open, stayed at my desk every night, notebook and flashlight in hand. Then on May 16th, I saw something I still don't have the words for. It was around 10:45. The van had arrived at its usual time and hadn't moved since. Then I saw the driver's side door open. A figure stepped out, not hurried, not sneaky, just casual, like it belonged there. Too tall to be someone from around here. Dressed in a dark coat with a hood pulled up even though the weather was warm. It walked to the sidewalk, paused, and looked straight toward my window. I didn't think it could see me. My lamp was off and I was behind the blinds, but it tilted its head slightly, not as a gesture, but like it was listening, like it heard something most people wouldn't. Then it walked toward the Andersons' driveway, paused again, and kept going. It didn't knock, didn't go to the door. It just walked the perimeter of the house, slow, deliberate, like tracing a pattern it already knew. After circling once, it returned to the van and drove off. I told my parents again. This time, my mom believed me. She called the police the next morning and insisted they send someone who wasn't just there to make us feel better. That night, a cruiser parked across the street. Around 7:15, the van arrived, just like always. Only this time, when the officer got out to approach the van, reversed down the block lights off, turned the corner, and was gone before anyone could get the plates. The officer filed a report and stayed for another hour, but the van didn't come back. We didn't see it the next night either, or the next. A few days later, Sergeant Williams from the county came by with 2 other plainclothes officers and asked to speak with me. They'd reviewed the notes I'd kept, looked at the tape I'd tried to make. They said there were reports like this in other suburbs' vans that showed up like clockwork, same make and model, same missing plates. Sometimes pets went missing. Sometimes windows were found open that had been closed the night before. Sometimes nothing happened at all. Just that unsettling routine of being watched night after night until something broke the pattern. We never found out who it was or where they went. A month later, a new family moved into the neighborhood, and one night I heard the new kid across the street telling someone in his front yard, "There was this weird van I saw parked by the woods last night. No driver, just sitting there with the dome light on. I don't know what it means that it's still happening, but some nights, even now, I'll be driving home after a late shift, and I'll catch a glimpse of something familiar at the far end of a road just out of reach of the lights. A still, quiet van engine, off no plates, waiting for something. And I keep driving. I don't usually stay in small towns. I like cities, noise movement places that never fully shut down. But in the spring of 2022, after a string of exhausting freelance contracts, I booked a last-minute Airbnb in a quiet beach town along the South Carolina coast. It was meant to be a reset. 3 nights, just me and the sound of waves and no unread emails. The place was a converted guest house behind a larger home, a tidy one-bedroom setup with pastel shutters and a front porch swing that creaked gently in the ocean breeze. Miss Ruth, the host, met me at the gate with a warm smile and a key in a leather holder. She looked to be in her 70s, dressed in a lavender cardigan, despite the humidity, and spoke with a kind of soft southern formality I wasn't used to. "You'll have the whole place to yourself," she told me. "And there's a binder inside with Wi-Fi, restaurant recs, and beach access times." It was early evening when I arrived, the sky a faded tangerine behind the Spanish moss, and the air smelled like damp pine and salt. I brought in my bag, opened the windows, and set my laptop on the little dining table. Everything inside was staged with care: handmade quilts, antique doorknobs, a vintage mirror above the dresser that looked like it had been there forever. Quiet, cozy, harmless. That first night I slept deeply. No alarms, no notifications, no traffic noise leaking in through city windows. Just the faint sound of waves and wind. The only strange thing was that I woke up once, sometime around 3:00 a.m., with this odd sense that someone had walked past the bed. I sat up, heart fluttering for a second, but the room was empty. The door was locked. I chalked it up to dreaming and went back to sleep. The second day was uneventful. I wandered into town, grabbed lunch at a seafood shack with uneven floors and plastic menus, and chatted with a local gas station clerk about weather patterns. Everyone was polite in that watchful way that small towns can be. Curious, but not invasive. I made dinner back at the guest house and spent the evening sketching out a branding layout for a client who didn't even know I was on vacation. That night I double-checked the locks before bed. There was a bolt on the door, a chain latch, and shutters that closed from the inside. I left the small lamp on in the living room just in case I woke up again and needed light. And I did wake up. But this time it wasn't just a feeling. It was a sound, a faint creak like weight shifting on the wooden floor just beyond the bedroom. I froze, listening, the kind of stillness that makes your ears buzz. Another soft sound, something brushing against the hallway wall. Not fast, not loud, just present. I reached for my phone, but the screen was dead. It had been charging on the nightstand, but now it was blank. I listened harder. Then the quietest click, like a doorknob turning or being tested. I gathered my nerve and flicked on the bedside lamp. The hallway was empty. I got up slowly, heart thudding, and made my way toward the front door. Still locked, chain latched, no windows open. I checked every corner of that tiny guest house, under the bed, behind the curtains, even the bathroom cabinets. Nothing. In the mirror above the dresser, I looked at myself, just myself, tired, anxious, but then I noticed something that still turns my stomach when I think about it. The reflection behind me was wrong. In the mirror, the lamp on the far end table was off, even though in the room itself it was glowing quietly. I turned around to check, thinking maybe I was just seeing it from a weird angle. But it was on. Warm yellow light, just as I'd left it. I looked back at the mirror. The lamp was off, and something was standing in the hallway behind me. Not in the room, just in the reflection. Tall, male. Shoulders turned slightly toward me, like it had just stopped walking. I whipped around, nearly knocking over the chair. The hallway was empty. When I looked back again, the mirror showed only me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with the lamp on, listening for any sound that might explain what I saw. Nothing came. Just the wind shifting the shutters and a distant foghorn from the water. In the morning, I told Miss Ruth I needed to leave early. I said there was a family emergency and I'd leave the key in the mailbox. She didn't press me, just nodded and said, "These old houses have their moments. Sometimes they remember more than they should." I didn't ask what she meant. I packed quickly and stopped at the same gas station on my way out of town. The same clerk was there, and he asked how I'd liked the stay. I told him it was fine, just a little too quiet for my taste. Then he frowned slightly and said, "You stayed at Miss Ruth's place." "Huh?" I nodded. "She doesn't rent that out much anymore," he said, glancing toward the windows. "Not since her son passed. Used to live back there after the divorce. Odd guy, kept to himself, always pacing the hall. I guess she wanted to keep the space alive." I didn't say anything else. I just left. That drive home felt longer than it should have. Every gas stop and bathroom break, I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see something in the mirrors. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if I saw anything at all. But sometimes when I'm working late and the house is quiet, I'll glance toward the hallway and feel like something just turned and walked away. And more than once, I've caught my reflection doing something I wasn't. Back in 2007, right before graduation, my friends and I went to the state fair outside Wichita. We weren't big on rides, but we'd gone every year since middle school, mostly for the food and the people watching. That year it felt like a goodbye to more than just high school. It was one of those early May nights when the breeze still carries some of the cold from spring, and everything smells like kettle corn and hot grease. I went with Charlie and Denny. We'd grown up together, and we were trying to squeeze in one more night before we all drifted off to college or jobs or whatever came next. We got there around 7, parked in the grass lot past the livestock barn, and wandered the main stretch between the funnel cake trailer and the Ferris wheel. It was crowded but not chaotic, just enough noise to feel anonymous. Around 9, after we had gone through the haunted hay maze and nearly lost Denny in a blackout corner, we spotted one of those old-school photo booths. You know the kind, metal frame, red curtain, little bench, barely wide enough for 2, though we always crammed in 3. The sign above it said, "Still prints in 3 minutes," in fading gold letters. Denny laughed and said we should get one last picture, just for the scrapbook his mom insisted on keeping. Charlie and I rolled our eyes, but followed him in. It took 2 strips, 6 pictures in total. The first was a blur. The second caught us mid-laugh. The third had all 3 of us grinning like idiots. The last one, though, that's where things start to slide. By the 5th frame, a girl had joined us. She leaned in from the left side. We didn't notice her at the time, just thought she was someone trying to photobomb. She had straight, dark hair, big eyes, and this blank sort of smile, like she wasn't really sure what she was doing. Charlie scooted to make room, and she squeezed in right as the 6th flash went off. When the strip printed, we laughed it off. Denny even joked, "Hey, mystery girl, if you see this, thanks for not stealing my wallet." Then we flipped it over and noticed something strange. In the last frame, the one with her in it, her face was wrong. Not blurry, not distorted, just expressionless. And her eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were aimed lower off to the side, like she was watching something else entirely. We looked around to see if she was nearby, But the crowd had shifted, people coming and going. The line for the fried dough stand had tripled. Charlie shrugged and said, "Maybe she's with the crew." But something about it unsettled me. It was the way she'd leaned in, not rushed, not playful, just there. We decided to walk a bit, maybe find the corn dog cart and call it a night. But as we passed the booths, Charlie tapped my shoulder and said, "There, that's her." I followed his finger toward the dunk tank area. The girl was standing behind the crowd near the edge of the lights, not moving, just watching. Same hair, same jacket. But when we started to walk over, she turned and slipped behind the game trailers. We cut through the row of games trying to catch up, but by the time we got to the back, there was nothing. Just a few staff breaking down a ring toss table and a man in a blue polo carrying an empty popcorn bin. We figured she must have walked back toward the parking field, so we didn't think much of it until later that night. Denny dropped me off first. I still lived out near the edge of town and my bedroom faced the side yard. Around 2 a.m., I was lying awake, flipping through the photo strip again, mostly amused. But then I noticed something that hadn't registered earlier. The girl's hand in that last frame was resting on Charlie's shoulder. Only Charlie hadn't felt it. He never mentioned it. And her hand looked wrong, like the angle was reversed, thumb on the wrong side. I texted Denny about it, but he didn't answer until morning. He said the same thing happened to him. He couldn't sleep, kept staring at the photo, and the longer he looked, the more it bothered him. "Her jacket's not zipped," he wrote, "but you can't see a shirt or skin, just black, like it drops off." The next day, Charlie didn't show up to school. Or the day after. His mom thought he was staying with Denny or me, but neither of us had seen him since the fair. By the third day, police were involved. His car was still in his driveway, keys inside. Phone untouched. Officer Delgado came by our place to ask questions. I showed him the photo strip, and when he saw the girl, he got real quiet. Didn't say much, just took the print and said they'd follow up. They never did. About a week later, Denny said he saw her again, at the edge of the soccer fields near the woods. Just standing there, same posture, same jacket, like she hadn't moved since the photo. He ran. Didn't even stop to look back. We stopped talking about it after that. I graduated, left town, tried to let time smooth it over. But I've kept a copy of that photo strip. It's faded now, curled at the edges. In the last frame, Charlie's smile is just starting to fall, like he saw her right as the shutter clicked. And the girl, her eyes aren't looking off to the side anymore. They're looking straight at me. I don't usually stay in the kinds of motels where the front desk is behind bulletproof glass, but that stretch of Highway 108 didn't leave me with many options. I'd just finished a freight check in Modesto and had one more day on the road before heading home to Tempe. I remember thinking it would be nice to stop somewhere quiet for once. No truck stop humming all night, no TV flickering through the walls. Just one night of sleep before the last push home. It was late September. Warm during the day, but you could feel the seasons turning as soon as the sun dipped behind the hills. Sonora's the kind of place that feels older than it is. Lots of history out there. Gold Rush remnants, shuttered storefronts, churches that look like they were built before California became a state. The motel sat a little ways off the main drag, tucked behind an abandoned auto shop and a pair of leaning palm trees. The guy working the desk was named Tony, middle-aged, soft-spoken, seemed tired in a way that felt permanent. He slid me a clipboard without much small talk, said checkout was 11. The place was mostly empty. 4 cars in the lot, one of them his. He gave me room 107, ground floor facing the back lot. I unpacked a small overnight bag, brushed my teeth, and lay on top of the covers with the TV on low. It was one of those flat screens bolted to the dresser playing some local news rerun. I wasn't really watching. Around 10:45, I clicked it off and reached for the lamp. That's when I heard it. A loud knock. Not at my door at the 1-2 rooms down. Room 109. 3 slow, spaced-out knocks, then nothing. At first, I figured it was just a late check-in. Maybe someone got the wrong door. But then it happened again. A second knock. Same rhythm. 3 taps. Long pause. By the third time, I'd sat up and walked to the window. I pulled the curtain just enough to peek through. There was no one there. The hallway was empty. Just the sodium lights casting that strange orange glow on the concrete walkway. No car had pulled up. I even leaned a bit to glance toward the lot, still just the 4 cars, unmoved. I waited a while, eventually went back to bed, though I didn't fall asleep right away. Not because I was scared, really, just unsettled. Something about the timing of those knocks felt too deliberate, like whoever did it was waiting between rounds. Sometime after midnight, I must have drifted off. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up again. No sound, no dream, just awake fully suddenly. I sat up and checked my phone for the time. That's when I noticed the light from under my door. It wasn't the hallway light. It was blue. It moved. Just a thin bar of soft blue light, sweeping slowly past my door, almost like someone was holding up a phone flashlight. But it wasn't bright enough. It looked filtered like moonlight through tinted glass. I didn't move, just watched it glide past, then disappear. A few minutes later, I cracked the door and peeked out. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound. The hallway was dead quiet, and the air had that stillness you only get right before dawn. Next morning, I asked Tony if anyone had checked in late. He looked up from his crossword and said no. Just the same 3 rooms had been rented all night, mine, his, and 209. That caught my ear. Upstairs, I asked. He nodded, said she'd checked in 2 days ago. Paid cash, mid-30s, traveling alone, no bags. Just asked for a top-floor room and didn't want maid service. I didn't ask anything more, but I remember the way he said it, like he was repeating a story he'd already told someone else. Later that afternoon, I passed by 209 while bringing my bag to the car. The blinds were closed, and there was a yellow receipt still tucked in the door frame, the kind they leave when no one answers for room service. That night, I stayed in a bigger place near Bakersfield. Nothing strange, but 2 days later, I got a call from an officer with the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Department. Said he got my number from the motel's guest log. Asked if I'd seen or heard anything unusual during my stay. I told him about the knocks and the blue light. He was quiet for a second, then asked if I'd seen a woman leave room 209. I hadn't. He thanked me and said they'd been looking for her since that morning. Tony had called it in when the room key showed up on the front desk with no explanation. Apparently, the beds were still made, the bathroom untouched. No signs of entry or exit. They pulled the footage from the stairwell camera. No one had gone in or out of that room in over 48 hours. The tape didn't show anyone knocking on the door downstairs. No visitors, no staff, not even a passing shadow. The only thing they couldn't explain was a brief flickering blue light caught on camera at 3:17 a.m. It didn't come from any of the rooms. It came from the hallway wall itself, like something inside the building was moving just behind the surface. Last I heard, the woman's name hadn't been confirmed. No ID, no card on file, just a receipt and a room number. Tony stopped returning my calls after that, and I haven't stayed in a motel since. I once took a work trip to a small town in coastal Maine, the kind of place that only seemed half awake even in the middle of the day. The job required me to spend 3 nights there, and instead of a hotel, I ended up in an old boarding house that had been converted into a handful of rooms for travelers. It wasn't much to look at, but the owner, Nancy, was friendly in that quiet, reserved way people from small towns often are, and she handed me a brass key on a heavy wooden fob like it had been in use for decades. The house itself had that layered smell of sea air wood polish and something older, something that clung to the curtains and carpet no matter how many windows were open. I was put in the downstairs room near the front, while the only other guest at the time was a man Nancy mentioned was staying upstairs. She didn't give his name, only said he had arrived 2 nights before and kept to himself. The first evening was uneventful. I worked on paperwork at the small desk in my room, ate a sandwich I'd picked up earlier, and tried to ignore the creaks of the old house as it shifted with the coastal wind. Around 10, I heard steady pacing above me. It started as slow footsteps, then turned to a restless back and forth, like someone walking the same short distance over and over. It went on for nearly an hour before it stopped all at once, leaving the air oddly still. I tried not to think about it and went to bed. The next morning, I mentioned it to Nancy while pouring myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen. She looked surprised, almost unsettled, and told me the upstairs guest had checked out early that morning, long before sunrise. I must have looked confused, because she added quickly that he had come down with his bag and left the key on the counter before she was even awake. That night, I settled in earlier than before. The house was very quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than usual, like something was pressing down on the air. Around midnight, I woke up suddenly, not from a dream, but from the faint sound of footsteps above me. The pacing was back, measured and deliberate, right over my bed. I sat there listening, telling myself the sound was carrying from outside, or maybe from the pipes, though deep down I already knew it wasn't either. The footsteps stopped again as suddenly as they had begun. This time I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for them to start again. They didn't. But around 2 in the morning, I heard something else. The slow groan of a door hinge, followed by the faintest creak of the stairs. I held my breath as each board gave way under a careful weight, 1 step at a time, moving downward. When they reached the landing outside my door, everything went silent. I don't know how long I lay there staring into the dark, every muscle in my body locked still. At some point, exhaustion won out, and I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes again, faint morning light was slipping past the curtains. I sat up immediately, checking the lock on my door. It was still bolted from the inside. That morning, I asked Nancy again about the guest. She gave me the same story he had left early the day before. Key returned, room empty. I pressed further, asking if maybe another guest had arrived late in the night, but she shook her head firmly. No one else had come. I shouldn't have, but later that afternoon, while Nancy was tending to the front porch, I went upstairs and pushed open the door to the room directly above mine. The room was neat. The bed made curtains open to the gray light off the sea, but there was something strange about it. On the desk, near the window, a half-empty glass of water still sat there, beads of condensation trailing down its side. The impression of a head still pressed into the pillow was fresh, as though someone had just gotten up, and the faintest smell of tobacco lingered in the air, though Nancy's entire house was strictly non-smoking. I closed the door carefully, and when I stepped back into the hall, I could have sworn I heard the boards behind me groan like someone shifting their weight, waiting for me to move along. I never told Nancy what I saw, and I cut my trip a night short, claiming my work was finished. To this day, I can still feel the weight of those footsteps above me, that careful descent of the stairs in the middle of the night, and the knowledge that someone or something had never really left that room. That was the last story I needed to share tonight. Thinking back on these places, the old motels, the diners, the roads that feel too quiet after dark, I realize how many of them should have been forgettable. They were only stopovers, backdrops to ordinary errands, the kinds of spaces you pass through without remembering much about. And yet they linger. What unsettles me isn't the possibility of ghosts or curses, but the weight of the ordinary turned strange, the way a room or a sound can carry the memory of someone you never really saw. Each of these stories is a reminder that the most unsettling moments rarely come with explanations, only impressions that refuse to fade. So as you settle into your own quiet tonight, remember that the places we pass through often remember us too, in ways we can't quite name. Maybe that's what makes them stay in the mind long after the night is over. Thank you for staying with me through to the end. If you've enjoyed these quiet, unsettling stories, I hope you'll share them with a friend, follow the channel, and subscribe for the nights still to come. And tell me, have you ever stayed somewhere ordinary that left you with a feeling you couldn't explain?